Frequently, you'll be switching back and forth between tasks in Dreamweaver. Some days you might be doing heavy coding, while other days you might be working with dynamic data or CSS layout. Often, this will require using panels and toolbar layouts that differ from each other significantly. Rather than having to constantly open and close panels and rearrange them, we can use Workspaces to quickly switch between interface setups and even create our own when the presets don't suit our needs. The easiest ways to access your Workspaces are to use the Workspace switcher right up here on the application toolbar. If I click on this, I can see that I have a lot of presets, some for application developers, classic view that helps mimic the last version of Dreamweaver, a coder view, a designer view, all sorts of really fun stuff. When working in one of these workspace layouts, you might do something to customize it a little bit. So for example here, I might decide that I want to float the CSS styles panel for whatever reason. And I can continue to work now and switch between workspaces. If I switch back to Designer, for example, notice that it sort of resets everything to where it's supposed to be in Designer. But here's something that's really curious about this. If I go back to Classic, it doesn't go to the default Classic view. It remembers that I have undocked the CSS styles panel when I'm in Classic. Now, this memory only persists for this session, but this is really nice because if I go to Classic view and I decide there's just something about it that I don't like, for example, if I don't like the split screen view, or in this case, the CSS styles panel floating, I can set those out, and then knowing that every time I go back to the Classic workspace, it remembers this. Now, what if I do something that I didn't mean to do? Maybe I'm going to undock the AP elements as well, and maybe dock those guys together, and then I realize, that's a mistake. Well, here's something that you can do as well. I can go right back up to the Workspace switcher, and I can choose to reset the Classic workspace. When I do that, it goes right back to Dreamweaver's default version of the Classic workspace. So it's really flexible and really customizable. Speaking of customizing, you can create your own workspaces. Something that I do very frequently in Dreamweaver is run tests on my site as I'm working. You'll notice if I go up to my Workspace switcher, there's really nothing here for testing, so we're going to create our own. I'm going to go up to my menu, and I'm going to go to Window, and I'm going to go down, and I want to find my results grouping. Here we have site reports and all sorts of things that you can do when you're checking and testing your site. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. By default, it sort of docks them below my properties inspector. That causes, again, a lot of screen real estate to be taken up. So I'm going to grab the gray bar here and undock them and sort of float them out. Now, when I float these guys out, maybe I want some of them, but not all of them. For example, maybe I don't need the search and the reference. I just want to run some reports. So I could grab those and undock them and close them. So here we're customizing these a good bit. So now all we have left in this sort of floating panel grouping, it's going to be running reports, is validation, browser compatibility, just stuff that we're going to be using for testing. So I'll go up to my Workspace switcher, and I'm going to tell it that I want to create a new workspace. When I do that, I can just go ahead and name this whatever I want. I'm going to name it testing because that's what I'm going to be using this for. So now that we have our new workspace created, this is saved within Dreamweaver, and every time I open up Dreamweaver, I'm going to have access to this workspace. So that's really, really nice. So now I can go up to my Workspace switcher, and I could go back to, say, Classic for a moment. I could reset Classic. I could go to Designer, and notice that at the very top of this order is my custom workspaces. So your presets will be below your custom, so your custom workspaces are always a little easier to find. I'm going to click on Testing, and there we go. We go right back to our testing setup. By using Workspaces, you can switch from task to task in Dreamweaver without spending a lot of time rearranging panels and resetting views. My advice is to take some time. Once you start using Dreamweaver, notice how frequently you find yourself opening and closing certain panels. If you frequently open or close specific panels based on common tasks, consider building a workspace around them so that you don't have to keep doing that on a day-to-day basis.